In this video, we are going to learn about UV sets and how to use the UV set editor. If you are a beginner to do 3D software, you might have encountered UV sets by accident, and this happens often if you are importing a model from another software into Maya. So if you're importing a model from Blender or from ZBrush, you might encounter situations where it seems like your UVs are disappearing. You created a model and you created the UVs and they are not the same as they were when you created them. And this is due to the fact that your model might most likely have multiple UV sets. So let's see what those UV sets are. If I go to my UV menu, make sure you have the modeling drop-down selected on the left and go to UV and UV set editor. If I select any of these models, so this model has been brought in from ZBrush, you can see that this has a UV set called map1. So any UVs that we make will be mapped onto this one UV set. And this one has a UV set called diffuse UV, and this one does as well. Now, the situation that people run into, especially students, is that if you select all of these and combine them in Maya for some reason, you now have two UV sets. So you have diffuse UV and you have map1, and you can map completely different UVs onto both of these sets. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm just going to do a planar projection on diffuse UV, and you'll notice that that planar projection does not appear on map1. So essentially now I could UV this whole object on diffuse UV, and it could I could have a certain set of UVs here, and they would not appear in map1. Or if you're UVing and you don't know that you're using UV sets, you might UV some of your stuff in diffuse UV and you might UV some of it in map1. So how do we prevent this from happening, and how do we stay aware of the UV sets? So the first thing is when you're importing a model from ZBrush and planning to combine it, just check your UV sets, go to your UV set editor and see what UVs your model has. So if I undo a few steps, let's go back to this. So we can see that our model has two UV sets. We have diffuse UV and we have map1. We can just rename this to diffuse UV. And then when we combine it, all of our objects are just going to have diffuse UV and you will not have two UV sets. But what do we do if we have the UV sets created already? So for example, if I go to Mesh Combine and I already have these two UV sets, how do we make sure we are using the correct one? In some rare situations, you might actually want to use the two UV sets. These are often used in XGen workflows because you have one UV set for your XGen procedural hair generation and the other UV set for the texture. So that might be a situation where you want to use this, but for modeling, you often don't need these two UV sets. So let's say we created our UVs and all of them are on the diffuse UV and we do not have them in map1. So ideally, what you should be able to do is you should be able to delete map1 by just hitting this delete button right here. But sometimes you cannot do that. You'll notice that Maya doesn't let you delete the default UV set. So if I have this selected, in this case, this might be the default UV set. It's usually the one at the top. If I hit delete, you'll see in the script editor that the default UV set cannot be deleted. In this case, we are fine with that because we have our correct UVs on diffuse UV. But if this were a situation where we did not have this, and we had our UVs mapped onto map1, for example, then in this situation, if we hit delete, then we are deleting our UVs and we have to start over. So what you could do here is go to your UV sets section in your UV editor. Now we have our UVs on map1. So let us select this and go to copy UVs to UV set. And we just want to copy this to diffuse UV. And now we have the same UVs on both of our UV sets, and we can very easily just delete map1. So whenever you're importing objects, whenever you're creating UVs, it's a good idea to be aware of what these UVs are named. If you model your objects in Maya, all your UV sets, all your objects are generally going to have UV sets that are named map1. But you might run into this when importing, or some situations where you might create a different UV set. So just keep this in mind. If you have mapped out UVs onto one set, you can always copy them over. So just if you notice disappearing UVs, just open the UV set editor and check if you have more than one UV set.